Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Smackdown Stew Report. We are here live on the Smackdown Stew YouTube channel. As you can see behind me, John Cena, the champ, is here joining me today, the current WWE champion. You can't, what do you say, John? You can't see me. We're right there. We can see you. Um, welcome to the Smackdown Stew Report um, for June 17th, 2025. I lost a couple of years there. Um, so today, and right off the top, don't forget to subscribe to the Smackdown Stew YouTube channel and like the video. And like the video, of course, you can send an email as usual to smackdownstewchannel@gmail.com. That's smackdownstewchannel@gmail.com. And I will read your emails on the air. You can also check out the Facebook page, SmackDown Stew YouTube channel on Facebook, and you can comment. You can also comment here. Um, and the reason I came on at 7:30 is I know a lot of you want to watch what could be the final game in the Stanley Cup final between our Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. Go Oilers! Oilers need a win tonight. All right, now back to wrestling. Back to wrestling. We're going to take a look today at World Championship Wrestling, the WCW, as it's called, and how it became the WCW. And also, we'll have a brief This Week in Wrestling History so you all can enjoy uh, Game 6 of the Stanley Cup final. So, we're going to get right to it. And we're going to get right to it with the World Championship Wrestling. So, World Championship Wrestling, WCW. Before that, it was of course, an American professional wrestling promotion that existed between 1988 and 2001. Now, it all began with Georgia Championship Wrestling. Um, Georgia Championship Wrestling was a promotion out of Georgia, owned by the Briscoes. It was owned by Jack and Jerry Briscoe and booked by Ole Anderson of the Andersons. And it was the first NWA territory to gain cable television across access, and it was broadcast by Ted Turner's WTCG TV in Atlanta, and the station that evolved into the Super TBS Superstation. And of course, the show was always broadcast every Saturday night at 6:05 to 8:05. So everybody knew that time. 6:05 was wrestling. Now, after founding his own company, Titan Sports, Vincent K. McMahon purchased his father's Capital Wrestling Corporation and merged it into Titan Sports under the leadership and the name of the World Wrestling Federation, now WWE, and it became the top promotion in North America. And Georgia Championship Wrestling devised the name World Championship Wrestling as their show in an effort to compete. And in 1982, Georgia Championship GCW changed the name of its Georgia Championship Wrestling television show to World Championship Wrestling. Since it already started running shows in neutral territories such as Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Michigan. McMahon's World Wrestling Federation, now WWE, as both promotions had secured television deals, and the WWF was trying to become a national and opposed to regional entity. The McMahon had purchased his father's company, Capital Wrestling Corporation, a pro wrestling territory that was operating, of course, in the Northwest, and it merged into its own company. And the WWE would leave, of course, the NWA and create WWF All American Wrestling on the USA Network. Now, in 1984, April 9th, 1984, the Briscoe brothers sold their shares in Georgia Championship Wrestling, including their Saturday evening slot on WTBS, to Vince McMahon. Now, the WWF would take over Georgia Championship Wrestling's time slot in 1984, which was called Black Saturday. WWE's gimmick-based approach, in contrast to Georgia Championship Wrestling's more conflict and athleticism, driven Southern style of wrestling was negatively received by WTBS viewers, and and it forced Turner to decide to discontinue the WWF show. And meanwhile, of course, Ole Anderson refused to sell his shares in Georgia Championship Wrestling to the World Wrestling Federation, teamed with his fellow holdout shareholders, Fred Ward and Ralph Freed, to create Championship Wrestling from Georgia. Turner quickly secured a television deal with the new promotion, as well as with Bill Watts Mid South Wrestling based in Oklahoma. Now, in '85, under pressure from Turner, McMahon sold his TBS time slot under the World Championship Wrestling name to Jim Crockett Promotions, owned by Jim Crockett Jr. and his brother David Crockett, which was owned previously by their father, Jim Sr., Big, uh, Big Jim Crockett. But he passed away and the children took over. And a deal was brokered by former GCW partner Jim Barnett. The deal grew both companies, making Jim Crockett Promotions Charlotte based Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling into a national promotion that became synonymous with the NWA, while providing McMahon and the Titan Sports with capital they needed to stage their first WrestleMania. So the deal that the Crockett's got to buy back the airtime funded WrestleMania. Now, the new World Championship Wrestling, which was now a combination of Mid Atlantic Wrestling and Championship Wrestling from Georgia, became one of the top rated shows on TBS, allowing Jim Crockett Promotions to become and Jim Crockett Jr. to become NWA president for the second time. Of course, in 1986, Jim Crockett Promotions held the first Jim Crockett Sr. Memorial Cup, which showcased talent from the various NWA territories. Bob Geigel would later become the NWA president once again and purchase Geigel's Heart of America Sports Attractions, promoters of the Central Sports Territories. Now, in 1987, Jim Crockett Promotions would enter into an agreement to control championship wrestling from Florida and Universal Wrestling Federation, which covered Oklahoma, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana. By this time, the UWF had split from the NWA. This helped elevate Crockett to a third tenure as a NWA president. So they ran the territories till the 80s. Now, in 1984, Jim Crockett signed Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, and made him a booker for World Championship Wrestling. Rhodes had a reputation, of course, for creativity, um, authored many memory feud storylines and gimmicks like the War Games. And of course, Rhodes would be responsible for elevating up and coming wrestlers such as Sting, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Magnum TA, the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, Nikita Koloff, and Ric Flair. Now, in Jim Crockett Promotions was purchased outright by Turner on October 11th, 1988. Originally incorporated by TBS as the Universal Wrestling Corporation, Turner promised that WCW would maintain the athlete-oriented style of the NWA. Now, so what happened was they were um, WCW got into financial trouble. Jim Crockett Promotions. They because they had their private jets and they were spending so much money, more money that they were bringing in. They had talent, but Jim Crockett Jr. wasn't a very good businessman, and their accountant came in one day and he said, "This just isn't working. We're we're $5 million in the hole." So to they sold it to Ted Turner. Um, the sale was completed, of course, on November 2nd, 1988, with a televised taping of NWA World Championship Wrestling the very same day in WCW's hometown of Atlanta. Now, in 1989, proved to be a turnaround for WCW, with Ric Flair as both world champion and head booker. And of course, Flair would bring back Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Terry Funk into the promotions and did successful pay per views. Flair eventually would be replaced by Ole Anderson again as the head booker. Under Ole, WCW began gradually incorporating much of the gimmicks for which WWF was better known, and these stunts included a cross promotional appearance of Robocop, the Chamber of Horrors gimmick, and the Black Scorpion storyline, which turned out to be Ric Flair. And of course, both WCW and the NWA recognized Ric Flair as their world heavyweight champion through most of the first half of 1991. But however, the recently installed WCW president, a schmuck, Jim Herd, who was formerly the manager of the St. Louis TV station and also once been the regional manager of a Pizza Hut, turned against Flair for various reasons. Flair would be fired before the Great American Bash in '91 after failed contract negotiations. Herd wanted Ric Flair to be a kind of a Spartacus-like character, shave his head, put an earring. He didn't. That's what you get when you get a pizza guy try and run the show. A guy who never saw wrestling and never, didn't even know the business. Um, and in the process, they officially stripped him of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. But according to Flair's autobiography, they refused to return the $25,000 deposit he had put down on the physical belt. So he kept it and brought it with him when he was hired by WWF at the request of Vince McMahon. And of course, Flair incorporated the belt in his gimmick, dubbing himself the real world's champion. But of course, WCW, WCW forced WWE to blacken the title. They sent a cease and desist. Now, meanwhile, of course, WCW's product fell into a decline in 91, 92 under the presidency um, of Herd. Ric Flair, who had conflicts with Herd, once stated that Herd knew nothing, of course, about wrestling. Of course, they want him to be like a Roman gladiator. He didn't like it, and eventually, the programming was horrible. They had ding dongs as gimmicks, ding and dong, a tag team. He didn't know what he was doing, and people were begging for the for Hurt to get fired, and he was in January of 1992, succeeded by Kip Allen Fry. But his tenure running the WCW was very brief, and he would be replaced later in the year by the person that everybody thought would turn it around, Cowboy Bill Watts, who was formerly been the promoter of the Mid South Wrestling, later known as Universal Wrestling Federation, and was the first head executive of WCW to prior experience in the wrestling business since Jim Crockett left. Now, Watts would controversially make top rope moves, which were commonly preferred by stars such as Brian Pillman and the Steiner Brothers, illegal during the wrestling matches, among other changes. And after clashes with management over a number of issues, as well as feeling pressure from Hank Aaron over a racially sensitive piece of correspondence and accusations of anti Semitism from Paul E. Dangerously and Scotty Flamenco, both who were Jewish, Watts resigned, and of course, he was uh, replaced by Eric Bischoff, and the WCW. The WCW uh, now became a turnaround. They left the NWA, and so Bischoff became the executive vice president. Jim Ross was upset that the man who once answered to him is now his supervisor. He requested and received a release. Of course, he went to WWE, well, WWF, now WWE. And the infamous Lost in Cleveland storyline began when Cactus Jack first wrestled Big Van Vader. And he got a concussion. It was a crazy gimmick back then. But we're gonna move to 1994. Um, Bischoff needed to turn around the company. So what did he do? He decided to sign WWE's talent after because Hulk Hogan. First, what he did was he decided he needed a venue that would have a fresh audience. So what did he do? He got Universal Studios in Florida to host the worldwide telecasts because he had a fresh audience. He would sign Hulk Hogan. Hogan was doing Thunder in Paradise in Universal Studios, and Bischoff and Flair went to see him. So he aggressively recruited Hulk Hogan and then the Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, and in 1995, uh, Turner asked Bischoff how WCW could compete with McMahon's WWF. Bischoff, not expecting Turner to comply, said that the only way would be a primetime slot on weeknights, possibly up against WWE's flagship show, Monday Night Raw. And he didn't expect Turner to grant him. Turner granted him a live hour on TNT every Monday night. The new weekly show was Monday Nitro. It debuted on September 4th, 1995, live from the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota. Now, that's a surprise. Um, Ex NFL star Steve Mongo McMichael was a color commentator, and so was Bobby the Brain Heenan. Heenan came in '94. But one of the things that Eric Bischoff did, he always wanted to create an element of surprise. The day before the premiere broadcast of Monday Nitro, um, Lex Luger's contract with WWF, now WWE, expired. Um, and and he called Eric Bischoff, and what Bischoff did had him come in and walk on Nitro. People were surprised. They couldn't believe it because here he was wrestling at a house show the night before, and now he's in WCW. Because Luger himself, he came off a successful run in WWE and became one of the company's top stars. Of course, Luger, like I mentioned, had been employed with the WWF as recently as, well, I heard the night before his Nitro appearance. He had wrestled on a house show for the WWE in Halifax the night before his appearance on Nitro. The significance of the event would lead, of course, to the beginning of the Monday Night Wars. Now, um, so and the WWE started airing Billionaire Ted, skits, to get at and knock WCW. There was Ted, the parodies of Ted Turner, Billionaire Ted. Hogan was the huckster. Savage was the Nacho Man. And the WCW interviewer Mean Gene Okerlund was Scheme Gene. And of course, Turner would later admit that he was not offended by the skits and he found them funny. Now, Memorial Day 1996, this is when WCW started, and started on their path to beating WWE for 83 straight weeks. Because on Memorial Day 96, Scott Hall actually walked down into the crowd during a match. He interrupted a match and delivered his "You want a war? You people know who I am," he began, "but you don't know why I'm here." And he said that he and two of his associates were going to take over. Many thought he meant Bret the Hitman Hart and Shawn Michaels, but 2 weeks later, Kevin Nash showed up, delivered his own speech. He says, "This is where the big boys play. We didn't come here to play. The measuring stick just changed around here, buddy. You're looking at it." And the weeks following, Hall and Nash were collectively referred to as the outsider to come up and disrupt and everything. And it would all come to a head at WCW Bash at the Beach, 1996. Hall and Nash were scheduled to team with their mystery partner against Lex Luger, Randy Savage, and Sting. Now, Luger got injured at the beginning of the match. So, and in my view, this is because Hulk Hogan was at the beginning very apprehensive when Bischoff came to the idea. He was, he didn't know. He was afraid that if it didn't work, his career would be shot, and because he spent years developing that image. So Eric Bischoff had a backup. His backup was Sting. So, in my opinion, the fact that Lex Luger got injured told me, of course, that Bischoff wasn't 100% sure that Hogan would do it. So that's what, in my view, that Luger gets injured. You think it's 2-on-2. Where's the third guy? And Sting would attack the Macho Man. But Hulk Hogan, true to his word, because he had called about a week before Bash at the Beach, he called Eric Bischoff and said, "So who's the third guy?" Bischoff says, "I don't know." He says, "I'm the third man." Walks to the ring, and he walks to the ring, and everybody goes crazy. Dusty Rhodes says, "Hulkamania!" And Schiavone says, "Hulk Hogan's here. Hulk Hogan's in the building." And then Bobby Heenan says, but whose side is he on?" And he took heat for that by some in the business, saying he gave it away, but he was just doing his job. Hogan went to the ring, looked like he was going to attack the outsiders, went to the turnbuckle, and did that famous leg drop, or the famous leg drop on Randy Savage, and turned, and that was the formation of the new world order of wrestling. That was something that nobody has seen before. Hulk Hogan turning heel. It was the biggest surprise in wrestling history. The biggest face, the hero of professional wrestling, the All American, the one who kids looked up to, shockingly turned heel. I remember that pay per view. Back in the day, here, of course, in Montreal, you can watch the pay per view on cable scrambled. There was always that pay per view channel, but it was scrambled, so you could hear, but you couldn't see it. A few times, sometimes it would unscramble, and you'd see it for a few minutes. But this was scrambled. I couldn't watch it, but I phoned my friend after the pay per view and I asked who was the third guy. And when he said Hulk Hogan, because Hulk Hogan's my childhood hero, say your prayers and eat your vitamins, take your vitamins. I was stunned, but I couldn't boo him. And now, all these years later, when I started understanding the business, it was the best move that Eric Bischoff ever made by turning Hulk Hogan heel. And they beat WWF, now WWE, for 83 straight weeks. There was a segment where Hall and Nash were in the back with baseball bats at Universal Studios, and it looked like a real fight, so real that the people who lived around Universal Studios called the police. It was looked like a backstage fight. And of course, that spot, though, maybe many of you don't know, where Mysterio was thrown against the trailer, Mysterio said to Nash, "Throw me through the window." But the window was that small. He says, "If I throw you in the window, you won't survive." And they beat them for 83 straight weeks. But the problem ended up being that they, instead of pushing, the newer talent, they continued with the NWO. Everybody was joining the NWO. Bischoff said he wanted to have an NWO and a WCW. He wanted Thunder to be the NWO um, TV show, but it didn't work out like that. It was, and they didn't. The top guys like Hogan and Savage and Hall and Nash, and they wanted to be the older guys, and Savage wanted to be at the top, wouldn't give up their spot, and the fans got tired of it. You know, they didn't push the younger guys like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko and Perry Saturn, which became the Radicals in WWF, now WWE. Sting became the infamous Crow character. That in that era they were beating WWF, now WWE, but you know there were things that should have been done when DX invaded WCW, went to the parking lot. They should have opened the doors, let them in. It would have been something. But it just fell, and of course the Turner and Time Warner, they muzzled WCW. They wanted to do hardcore matches. They wanted to do things to compete with WWF, and they couldn't because the powers that be would silence them. Bischoff eventually was fired because the product went down, you know, and then they brought in Vince Russo. Enter Vince Russo. He screwed up WC. He thought because he was the writer for Raw that he could turn around WCW, but he didn't have one thing. He didn't have Vince McMahon behind him to to weed out the crappy storylines that he came up with. And of course, there was this controversy, Bash at the Beach 2000, which we will talk about on the next SmackDown Stew report. I'm going to keep it brief today because of the NHL, because of the Stanley Cup Finals, but that was a thing in itself. We're going to continue with WCW on the next SmackDown Stew report. We're going to take a look at this week in professional wrestling history before we go. A condensed version. In 1948 is when the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, was founded. 6 promoters from North America: Paul Pinky George, along with Al Haft, Tony Stecker, Harry Light, Orville Brown, and Sam Muchnick, decided to consolidate the championships of their regional companies into their one true wrestling championship of professional wrestling. And the directors decided that Orville Brown was the first man ever, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. In 1980, the NWA World Tag Team Championships changed hands when Jimmy Superfly Snuka and Ray Stevens defeated Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Jay Youngblood in Greensboro, North Carolina. In 1981, Dusty Rhodes defeated Harley Race in Atlanta, Georgia to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. In 1983, World Class Championship Wrestling Star Wars was held in Dallas, Texas, in front of 21,000 fans. David Von Erich defeated Jimmy Garvin of the Fabulous Freebirds to win the WCCW Texas Heavyweight Championship. Then in the main event, Bruiser Brody and Kerry Von Erich took the WCCW uh, American Tag Team titles from the other two Freebirds, Michael Hayes and Michael P.S. Hayes and Terry Gordy. In 1987, in the final of the NWA UWF Western States Heritage Title Tournament in Houston, Texas, Barry Windham defeated Black Bart by pinfall to become the first ever NWA Western States Heritage Champion. The belt wouldn't be around for long. He would be retired in December of 1988. In 1992, and here's something I don't think anybody knew, WCW Clash of the Champions aired that year. The event took place at the McAllister Fieldhouse in Charleston, South Carolina. It was the only Clash event that did not air live. Instead, the show had been taped 6 days earlier. And in 1994, King of the Ring was held in the Baltimore Arena in Baltimore, Maryland, in front of 12,000 fans. Owen Hart became the King of the Ring, the second ever King of the Ring. In 1995, ECW Barbed Wire Hoodies and Choke Slams was held in the ECW Arena in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In the main event of the show, the Sandman retained the ECW World Heavyweight Championship title against Cactus Jack in a barbed wire match. Following some controversy, Cactus Jack appears to have the match won because the Sandman can't answer the 10 count. However, Bill Alfonso refuses to acknowledge the win because the title can't change hands under those conditions. The match is restarted. The Sandman chokes Jack with the barbed wire and tosses him to the floor. And Alfonso decided that Cactus Jack can't continue and stopped the match, giving the Sandman the win. The fans of the arena were not happy with the decision, and Alfonso had to be smuggled out in the boot of a car due to fans waiting for him with baseball bats outside. Now, in 2001, on an episode of Monday Night Raw in Tampa, Florida, a masked man came to the ring riding a motorbike to the Undertaker's music. Getting into the ring, Jim Ross on a commentary said, "This must be the human being that's been stalking the Undertaker's wife." Taking off his mask in the ring, he revealed himself to be none other than the debuting Diamond Dallas Page, who got a huge pop from the crowd. In 2001, on an episode of WWF, WWE Monday Night Raw in Tampa, in 2001, the first ever episode of WWE's Tough Enough reality show airs on MTV. In that first season, the rookies were coached by Taz, Tori, Al Snow, and Jacqueline. The series was eventually won by Maven and Nydia. Finally, in 2002, the first ever NWA Total Nonstop Action weekly pay per view took place in Huntsville, Alabama. In a dark match just before they went live, Cheeks, weighing 450 pounds, hit the ropes so hard that they broke, and it would take close to an hour to get them replaced. Because of this, management put most of the show's non wrestling segments on first, including a live performance by Toby Keith. In the main event of the night, Ken Shamrock defeated Malice to win the vacant NWA World title. Now, before we go, I want to wish on Thursday of this week, we got a very special birthday. I want to wish a very happy birthday to the love of my life, the June bug, who is celebrating a birthday this Thursday. I say I love you, and we will celebrate this Thursday, and I will spoil you rotten. So don't forget to tune in next week for another edition of the Smackdown Stew Report. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the Facebook page. You can send an email, SmackdownStewChannel at SmackdownStewChannel at gmail.com. And also you can comment on the Smackdown Stew Facebook page, the Smackdown Stew YouTube channel. This is Smackdown Stew, and the champ who is here and evidently you can't see him, saying, ciao for now.